it's very important that you have everything that you need, including safety, which will be probably one of the last things I'm going to talk about, even though it is a very important part of this. If you're going to have a fire, there are 3 things that you are going to need for the actual fire, not counting safety. The first one is not an empty mind. That is O for oxygen. The first thing you need is air, specifically the oxygen part of air. If you were trying to put out a fire, you've got multiple ways of putting one out. You can use water, use a fire extinguisher, etc. If you've got a grease fire on your stove, on a frying pan, one of the easiest things to do is simply just put a lid on it. You will smother it. They talk about stop, drop, and roll if you're ever on fire. And really what you're doing is you're trying to smother it. You're trying to get the oxygen away from wherever the fire is at, covering somebody up with a blanket, etc. So if you're going to start a fire, this is probably the first place to start, is to make sure you have plenty of airflow. We'll come back to that in a moment. The next thing you're going to have is some sort of fuel. And there's going to be a reason to this order that I'll talk about in a moment. Your fuel could be anything. Obviously, when you think of a fire, most people think of a campfire. You're going to need some sort of wood. Well, if you've got wood, you might think, okay, I've got this big old log here, you know, that I'm going to set on fire and I'm going to burn that. Has anybody ever tried to light a big old log on fire? It's not that easy. It's not that easy. Fuel is actually going to be broken down into several different pieces, and we'll go into more in detail on that here in a moment. The third thing that you need for a fire then, and this may seem kind of ironic, is you need heat. You need a heat source. You need a point of ignition. So if you want to have a fire, you in a sense already have to have fire already, but technically not necessarily fire. You need some sort of heat source, because of course, if you've watched any sort of survivalist type show or seen movies going, something that's done like maybe in sort of prehistoric times, people are using flint and steel or just two pieces of rock to generate a spark, or making a bow saw to try and generate friction to generate that heat. Of course, most people will probably just use a lighter, is what you'll use nowadays. Which of course, when you think about it, is a smaller version of this whole thing. A typical lighter has some sort of fuel like butane. The heat is generated by that little wheel generating a spark, which is making use of the oxygen that's in the air, which is plenty enough oxygen to be able to light that tiny flame. So you have oxygen, you have fuel, you have heat. Well, you're not going to simply just take a match and stick it to this log and be like, woohoo, I've got a fire now. That's not how this works. Now, why is that? You'll definitely burn a small part on here, and this is where we come back to oxygen. Because you're not going to be able to generate enough heat, you're not going to get enough oxygen other than to burn that small part. You actually want to try and do the whole thing. So, what are you going to do first? You're going to start with something small. The smallest part of the thing that you're going to work with to build a fire is called tinder, which will be represented by these dots. Now, what is tinder? Tinder could be dryer lint. Dryer lint is a great tinder source. Of course, a lot of our clothes nowadays are made with artificial materials. They're made with polyesters and plastics and nylons and things like that. Ideally, you want to have something like cotton. But at the same time, regular dryer lint will work, because usually it's a mix of materials, which includes cotton. However, there are other materials you can use. Pine needles are a fantastic one, because pine needles have a lot of sap. Pine in general has a lot of sap, so it's a great fire starter anyway. You can use dried palmetto fronds, which you'll find all over the place in Florida. And then just the other night, we were doing a big event with the Boy Scouts, and they were going to build a fire, and nobody thought to bring any tinder. And I found these weeds growing, basically some sort of very tall grass, and it had all died, but the ends where the seeds were at had a material very similar to dandelion fluff. So using the heads of those weeds became a very fantastic tinder to use. So now you have a fuel that allows a lot of oxygen into it. So it's going to get started really easily, even with a small amount of heat. After that, you're going to have smaller stuff. Maybe toothpick size is what I usually refer to it as. Because this amount of heat may burn a toothpick, but may not. But this, once it catches, will definitely burn that. You can then go on to pencil size thickness up to finger size thicknesses of wood. Finally up to maybe wrist size pieces of wood, all the way up to your big logs. And basically what you're doing is you're taking this whole process and you're allowing it to do the work for you, because all you have to do is light this. This is then going to light that, which is going to light that, which will light the bigger stuff, which will then generate enough heat, and you'll have enough fuel and enough oxygen. Now, something to consider though, when you're going to build this fire, is keeping that amount of oxygen. So you have a big log, you have all this other stuff, you're not going to simply just layer all this stuff in and drop a log on it. It's not going to work. What you're going to want to do is you need to make sure that you maintain that oxygen. You've got plenty of fuel, you now have plenty of heat. What you're going to do is make sure you've got it all laid out, so that way everything has enough, maintains enough airflow, so that way as the fire builds, it will maintain that airflow and everything will get going. Now, I want to come back to one of the things I mentioned at the beginning, which was safety. Obviously, fire is dangerous. So when you have everything that you need to take a look at the area you're going to have the fire in. So always make sure that you're clear of overhead branches. Lots of times you're going to do it while you're camping. Make sure there's no low overhead branches. The area around you, because as happens with forest fires, fire spreads. Make sure that area is clean. And most importantly, and this is the thing a lot of people forget, make sure when you're absolutely done with the fire, you're going to bed at night, you're going to go climb into your tent, or maybe you're just going to walk inside your house, make sure your fire is cold out. And what cold out means is there is no more heat. So you're going to saturate everything with water to the point that there's no more steam coming up. So that way, there's still plenty of oxygen out there. The fuel may still be there, although it's probably wet at this point. But heat is not possible because water absorbs so much heat, you're no longer going to be able to get that combination together to be able to have a fire. So, next time you get the opportunity, go out. Don't just go buy a bundle of firewood. Make sure you've got all the other small pieces, which you could probably find around your yard or in your neighborhood. Make sure you've got a clean place set up. Make sure you've got water to be able to put it out. And have yourself a good time. Thank you.